We're all lads together. Cars. We all love cars. Picture yourself outside Henley. You're in a Morgan sports car. You can hear the roar of the V6 engine. Beautiful gleaming bonnet stretching out before you. It's red. It's got those sort of bike spokey things on the wheels. I'm sitting there next to my rowing coach. We've got the wind in our hair. You can hear the birds. It's summer and we're living the life. This is the dream. And here's me. I'm a northern boy. And I'm thinking, this is how they live in the south. It's amazing. And we drive into the steward's car park, and they've got the Bentleys, and they've got their Jaguar XGO, whatever. They've got the champagne on the tables and the caviar, and they've got all the, Daphne, you didn't tell me Henley was on the river sort of conversations going on. Living the dream. Picture yourself in another car. This is a fairly tatty, battered saloon car. Bloke's driving, wonderful Christian guy. Wife next to him, 2 kids in the back. They're singing the Christian songs. My soul's got an anchor and all this sort of stuff. Going round a bend, it's night time. Car comes round on the wrong side of the road. Bam. He's dead. Wife through the windscreen. Umpteen operations later, she's being reconstructed. Kids now don't have a father. Really struck me that good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people. And it's all just mixed up together. And it forces you to ask the question, what is the point of being a Christian? Why bother being a Christian? What is the payback that you get? Because it all seems mixed up. Good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people. Why bother? And if you're a Christian, I'd be very, very surprised if you've never asked that question yourself. Certainly for myself as a Christian, when the oldest of our 4 children was born, Down syndrome, and now been diagnosed with autism, so dual diagnosis. Wife gets chronic migraines, has done since she was the age of 3. You think, well, what difference does it make being a Christian? And if you're not a Christian, this may be one reason why you haven't actually taken that step, because you're thinking, well, why bother? What's the payback? What do I get from this? Jesus told a story in Matthew chapter 13 that you may want to just turn to. Matthew 13, verse 24. It's the parable of the wheat and the weeds. And it begins in 13:24. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field, but while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. And when the wheat sprouted and formed ears, then the weeds also appeared. The parable of the wheat and the weeds, or the wheat and the tares, as it's sometimes known. What is the difference? I want you to tell me what you think this is. It's not difficult.
Camembert.
No, wrong.
Camembert. Cheese.
A what?
Camembert.
Camembert? No.
Toffee.
Birthday cake.
Birthday cake. It's a cake. It's a picture of humanity. That is all the people in the world. You can cut up this cake, you can slice up the cake in lots and lots of different ways. So you could cut that cake according to nationality, and how many different pieces of cake would you have?
7 million.
According to nationality.
192.
Is it 167? Plus 1 from last week. Yeah, Southern Sudan has now become a nation, hasn't it? Okay, so it's just grown. So that's how many. You could cut the cake according to class, and you would have how many? Working class, middle class. Let's split those into 2. Bertie Wooster's, upper class. You could cut the cake according to skin colour. You'd have white, you'd have black, you'd have brown, you'd have yellow. Imagine, and some of you will find this easier than others, imagine for a moment that you are God and you are looking down on that cake. What do you see? Well, you see 2 pieces. Because as far as God is concerned, from his perspective, although he loves diversity, there are basically 2 pieces that cake falls into. So this parable is about a field, and there are 2 things growing in the field. What are they? And I'll give you a clue. They both begin with W. Wheat and wheat and weeds. Wheat and weeds. Only two things growing in the field. Two things growing in the field. Now, if I said to you, who's your father? Genuine question. Name of your father?
Jeff.
Jeff.
Mike.
Mike?
Hugh.
Hugh. Jonathan, in my case. If you turn over the page, because you see, Jesus tells the parable in verses 24 to 30. Over the page in 36 to 43, you'll see he explains what the parable means. In verse 38, who does it say everyone is a son of? Verse 38. Matthew 13:38. We are sons of sons of the kingdom. Good, thank you. Or
Sons of the evil one.
or sons of the evil one. And that is it. My wife is Swedish, and in Scandinavian countries, your surname often tells you who you are the son of originally. So my wife's maiden name is Philipson, son of Philip. This is saying that the whole of humanity is divided into two groups. We are either devil's son or God's son. That's what that verse is saying. We are either sons of the devil or sons of the kingdom, sons of God. So the whole of humanity is divided into these two identities, and the question is, who is who? How can you tell who is who? This is where the rub is. The rub is that you can't tell. You cannot tell. The story here is about the wheat and the weeds growing in a field. And the field, we're told in verse 38, is what? The world. The field is the world. All of them are growing together, and the point is that they are virtually indistinguishable. So you'll see in verse 28, a servant asked the owner, "Do you want us to go and pull up the weeds?" And the owner replies in verse 29, "No, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them." The point he's making is that the wheat and the weeds are virtually indistinguishable. Now the word used for weeds there in Greek is a word zizamion. It's quite a specialist word. It means, sometimes translated tares, it means darnel or bearded darnel. It's quite a technical term, agricultural term. Put your hand up if you've ever heard of Winifred Walker. No way! What book did she write?
No, I do. It's because you weren't partner.
Winifred Walker has written a definitive work called Plants of the Bible. And it's not a sort of page-turning airport thriller, but if you want to know about plants of the Bible, Winifred Walker is the bee's knees. She's the expert. And she says that bearded darnel, which is this thing in here, is virtually indistinguishable from wheat as it's growing up in the field. And it's an absolute farmer's pest and menace. It's virtually indistinguishable. And so, wheat and weeds, Christian, non-Christian, both growing in the same field, both growing together, they are virtually indistinguishable. When you look at their circumstances of their lives, they do the same sort of jobs, they eat the same sort of food, bad things happen to both sets of people, they grow up together, they're not living in sort of separate ghettos, experiencing very different life conditions, they grow up together. And so that brings us back to our original question, which is, well, why bother being a Christian? What is the point? What is the benefit of being a Christian? There's a guy in our church who I will call Bob, for the sake of this. I remember the first day he came to church, it was about 5 years ago. I'd never seen him before in my life. At the end of the service he said, "Can we go for a drink?" And we went for a drink in the local pub. And he told me a bit about his story, and then he said, "Look, I've never met you before, and I think I'm going to stay at this church. But I just want you to know that one thing I really struggle with is same-sex attraction." He wasn't saying that because he fancied me. He was just saying, I want to be honest right from the beginning about what my struggle is. 4 years on, Bob is still struggling with this same-sex attraction. He's a lovely, godly guy who is committed to growing in his faith, but he's aware this is a constant struggle. And he's aware there are lots of guys in the office that he feels drawn to. And for him, it's a really big issue. Why should I keep going in my faith when I could just go where my desires want to go and get hitched up with some bloke who I fancy and just jack it all in? Why shouldn't I jack it all in? What difference does it make being a Christian? Why go through the struggle? Jesus tells us in this parable. Verse 30, he says, "Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, and then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." That is why it is worth being a Christian and keeping going as a Christian. At the moment, we're all growing together. The wheat and the weeds are all in the same field. But Jesus says harvest time is coming. And when harvest time does come, well, we could say it's going to be B and B. What are the two B's in verse 30? So this is saying, where is everyone going to end up? There are two places, B and B. Anyone want to call out?
Burns and barn.
Burns and barn. We'll call them bonfire and barn. That is where everyone, according to Jesus, is going to end up when harvest time comes. When harvest time comes. And that is why he says it will make a difference in the end. That is why we need to continue in our faith. I don't know if you recognise these bags, whether you have these at home. We're a very environmentally friendly house. We're very green, at least my wife is. Tell me what these bags are for. What's this bag for? No, close. In this bag, we put all our recycling. And we're very assiduous at sort of separating it all out. The rubbish goes in this one. And all the stuff to be recycled goes in that one. And then on, I think it's Wednesday, we put these out. One truck comes and collects this. And it takes it off somewhere to a landfill or to an incinerator, and it's burnt off. It goes on the bonfire. And the other stuff, cardboard, etc., goes in this. And it's recycled. And its life carries on. And Jesus is saying that at the end, there's going to be a harvest. And everyone goes in one or other bag, and we've got very, very different destinations. Now, what is the point? What are we supposed to do? Well, the strange thing is, I don't know if you noticed in this parable, that Jesus doesn't actually tell us what we should do. He doesn't actually say, therefore, do this or do that. But if we look wider in the Bible, I think the point that we're supposed to take home from this is a word beginning with P, and it's a card game. Word beginning with P. Patience. Patience is the one. Patience is the one. We need to be patient. We need to be patient. I guess another word the Bible uses for it is hope. That if we're going to keep going in our faith as believers, we need to keep focused on where everything is going to end up in the end, and we need to be patient. Two blokes, both, this is rewind to 2000, August 2000, two blokes, both of them 62 years old. One Australian, one English. The Australian 62-year-old, and both were in the papers in the same month, August 2000. The Australian was a billionaire tycoon who loved to gamble. And he was in the papers because the headline was that he lost £13 million in 3 days, but it doesn't really matter if you're worth $3 billion. The guy was Kerry Packer. And this article went on to describe how Kerry Packer has had 8 heart attacks during his life, and he survived all of them. And on one occasion he was even pronounced clinically dead, and yet he came back and he lives on. And he's a whale, and he's a self-indulgent slob who just wastes millions and millions of pounds gambling. That's Kerry Packer. That's what he was in the papers for. The other guy, 62-year-old English guy, was a Christian. And lovely, godly guy, loved his wife, loved his kids. When he got married, he was penniless. He didn't have a thing because he'd spent his money on Japanese missions and buying theological books so he could get to know God better and be better equipped. And he became a Church of England minister. And in August 2000, he's working in a study. His wife goes out to the shops to get some meat for their anniversary that they're going to celebrate the next day. She comes back and she finds him on the floor and he's dead. He just had a massive heart attack. And he was a healthy guy, fit guy, just there on the floor and had a heart attack. And he was in the papers as well. But he was just in a local paper, the Cumbrian Gazette or something. There was just a little obituary about him. Two guys. One godly, using his money in a godly way. The other one, just a slob who's wasting it in the casino. What is the point of being a Christian? Was it worth that second man, who incidentally was my father, was it worth him being a Christian? And Jesus says, oh yeah, when it gets to the end, the difference is going to be huge. It's going to be enormous. It's going to be eternal. It's going to be chalk and cheese. It really matters. I don't read the Metro normally, but with all my commuting at the moment to get here from East London, I saw that with the Open coming up, it's all about McIlroy, isn't it? But there's one headline about Westwood, which said, Westwood is to prove the virtue of patience over a testing course. Talking about golf. Westwood is to prove the virtue of patience over a testing course. Patience is a virtue. For the Christian, patience is a necessity. If we're going to keep going, we've got to be patient. We've got to be prepared to wait. And of course, we live in a culture which says, I won't wait for anything. I hate waiting. I want it all now. Instant this, instant that. I won't wait. And Jesus is saying to us, you've got to be patient. If you're going to keep going, you've got to wait for what's coming at the end. Now, if you're someone who is not a Christian, you may be thinking, well, where do I fit into all this? You're talking to me about patience. Christians need to have patience. What about me? Patience is a game, it's a long-term game which we are to play if we are Christians. It is a game that somebody else is playing as well. And that person is God. 2 Peter chapter 3 says, the only reason this line has not yet been drawn and Jesus has not yet returned and the harvest has not yet come is because God is patient and he is waiting for more people to turn to him and to repent before it's too late. On the tube, you walk through these tunnels, people carried along with you, just this wave of people. And then at one point you go downstairs, I did it this morning, you go down this set of stairs and you come to a white wall, just all these white tiles in front of you, and they've got this board and it says Piccadilly line, it's arrow going that way east, arrow going that way west, and people just separate out into the two groups. This sea of people separated onto the two platforms. Just imagine standing down there on your own now before that board, and from the one platform you can feel the heat. I don't know if you've ever been next to a big fire and you just felt the heat is burning your face. You can feel the heat. And not only can you feel the heat, you can hear the sound of people crying and wailing, weeping, and the gnashing of teeth, as it says in this parable. And you turn around and from the other platform, you can hear the music and you can hear the laughter. And you can see the brightness of the sun shining through. You're standing there, which way would you want to go? Now you have to rewind because Jesus is saying that when you stand there down those stairs, you will have died and you will go one way or the other. And when you're standing there, you cannot choose which way you go. That will have been decided already. And so even now, as you're walking down this tube of people, being carried along with them, Jesus is asking you to decide where you're going to go when you get to the bottom of the stairs. And it's your choice. And you need to look to the end to make that decision now. Amen.